What's going on? It's Suk and I'm back with a brand new video on SuperDuprTech. And in today's video, I'll be bringing you my full and in-depth review of the M2 powered 15-inch MacBook Air. Also, we are on the road to 5,000 subscribers, so if you are new around here, then I must ask you to hit the subscribe button, clicking the bell icon to be notified of when any of my new videos go live. But without any further ado, let's hit the titles. So first up, let's get into talking about the design of this MacBook Air. It indeed follows the same design language in line with the other MacBook models. It's still made of aluminium and glass and is built very well with no flex to the chassis. It can be purchased in 4 different finishes, from your standard silver and space grey to starlight and midnight. Unlike the MacBook Pro models, the keyboard deck is the same colour as the rest of the device. You'll also notice there are not any noticeable holes for the speakers like we see with the MacBook Pro. Instead, the speakers fire from under the display, which bounces off the display aimed towards listener. The MacBook Air has no branding depicting the model, even on the underside like we see with the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. Also, the Apple logo on the lid of the device does not light up and is instead polished like we see once again with those other MacBook models. The display on this new 15-inch model, other than the size and resolution, is almost identical in terms of spec to its 13-inch sibling, meaning it is indeed an LCD panel and not a mini LED array like we see with the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro models. It does not support ProMotion and is so locked to a 60Hz refresh rate. It has a native resolution of 2880 by 1864, which means it indeed has a pixel density of 224 pixels per inch and has a maximum display brightness of 500 nits, which is okay. It's nothing spectacular, and you certainly will need to increase the brightness to near maximum if you're using this MacBook outdoors. It also has a display notch like we see with those other newer MacBook models, which houses a 1080p Full HD webcam. At this price point, it leaves much to be desired, especially if you've ever used the 14-inch MacBook Pros with their mini LED ProMotion displays. But I think it's just about acceptable given the price of this MacBook Air compared to the newer 14-inch M2 Pro powered MacBook Pros. The MacBook Air has MagSafe, which magnetically attaches to the side of the MacBook and can fast charge the MacBook Air to 50% in around 30 minutes, although as standard, the power adapter which comes included in the box with this MacBook Air does not support fast charge. So if you'd like to be able to fast charge this MacBook Air, then you will need to configure it with the 70-watt power adapter in the box, or you'll need to purchase it separately, which I think is a little unfair, because if you went into any normal retail store, then you'll get the dual USB-C 35-watt power adapter included in the box. And so if you'd like to fast charge this MacBook Air, then it'll cost you an additional £70 on top of the price of purchase. The cable is also braided and comes colour matched to the colour of the Mac, which will also help with its durability over the years. The great part about this charger is the cable portion of this charger is completely independent of the power adapter, which means if the cable was to break for whatever the reason, that you can change the cable portion of the charger, which means you won't have to buy an expensive MagSafe charger like we see with those pre-2016 MacBook Pro models. You also get 2 Thunderbolt USB 4 ports and a 3.5mm headphone jack, which now supports high excursion speakers. Perhaps the most disappointing thing about these ports is they still support only one external display, and whilst there exist other methods to have more than one external screen connected to the MacBook Air, natively it only supports one, which means you'll need to get an M1 or M2 Pro or Max MacBook Pro to be able to support more than one external display. Going back to the display, you'll notice that iconic notch from the iPhone now makes its introduction to the MacBook Air. It houses a Full HD webcam, which certainly is an improvement over the webcam of previous MacBook Airs, but it sadly does not feature Face ID, and if it were to ever come to a Mac, it most certainly will be on the MacBook Pros before the Air. but I'm not going to mark it down as Touch ID on this MacBook Air is still incredibly fast and responsive and almost never fails. Not to mention that if you have an Apple Watch, you could use the Apple Watch to unlock this MacBook Air. And so I've found that when it comes to using this MacBook Air, I rarely ever need to use Touch ID. The 2023 MacBook Airs have updated microphones, which has meant when it comes to having FaceTime calls and using Siri, it's able to pick up my voice surprisingly well. Take a little look at the webcam from the 13-inch MacBook Air model from 2022, the 16-inch M2 Pro MacBook Pro, along with the 14-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro. I'm sure you'll be able to hear and see the difference. So the footage that you're currently looking at has been recorded on a 2023 16-inch M2 Pro powered MacBook Pro. It is worth noting this particular model has a 1080p webcam, so you should get a good feel for how it is exposing and correcting for my skin tones, along with focusing for my face and exposing once again for the background. How do I sound? Does it sound any good? Let's take a listen to the M1 Pro powered 14-inch MacBook Pro. The footage that you're currently looking at has been recorded on a 2021 14-inch M1 Pro enabled MacBook Pro. So you should get a good feel for how this particular 1080p Full HD webcam is exposing for my face, the background, how in focus do I look, does the beard hairs look quite in focus, how do I sound? Do I sound quite louder? That's one thing that I've noticed from other MacBooks, is that the previous generation M1 Pro enabled MacBooks actually sounded much better. But hey, who knows? It might actually sound a little worse or a little better on these other newer models, who knows? But yeah, let's take a listen to how the footage sounds and looks on the 15-inch MacBook Air. The footage that you're currently watching has been recorded on the 2023 15-inch M2 enabled MacBook Air. And you should also get a good feel for how these microphones are picking up my voice. But hey, let's take a little watch and listen to how the 13-inch model of this MacBook Air also performs. The footage that you're currently watching has been recorded on the webcam of the 13-inch M2 enabled MacBook Air. So can you notice first and foremost if there are any differences between how I sound or how I look to the 15-inch model previous to this? Is there any differences? Let me know down below. But anyway, what I'm going to do now is switch across to the 720p webcam found within the previous Intel models of MacBook Air. Let me know if you noticed any differences in how I look, in how I sound. Let me know down below. The footage that you're currently watching has been recorded on a 2019 13-inch MacBook Air. This MacBook comes with a 720p webcam. So how does it look? And do I sound any better, or do I sound noticeably worse on this MacBook than what I previously did on the other models before it? Let me know. Leave your comments down below. The speakers on this MacBook Air, as I mentioned earlier, fire from the bottom of the display. And while they sound cleaner than previous models, it certainly doesn't compare to those other MacBook Pro models. Take a listen. For the longest time, Apple have been the brand to beat when it comes to trackpads. And while the competition certainly are improving year over year, Apple really have not changed the recipe. And if it's not broken, why change, right? It's still incredibly responsive and very accurate. while the gestures, once you use the machine for a little and try to learn them, honestly make more and more sense. And it allows you to stay more productive swiping from one app or desktop to another. Size wise, it's not too far off the 16-inch MacBook Pro models, which have the same size as the standalone trackpad. So yeah, you'll find that this trackpad will do you perfectly fine. Ever since Apple ditched the butterfly keyboard, the keyboards have been great. Now for a while I can tell that the keys aren't as stable as those butterfly keys, but they do have more depth and more travel, making the press of each key feel more deliberate. It has a full-sized function key row like we see with those higher-end MacBook Pro models. No complaints here. So you've probably noticed I'm leaving the performance towards the end, and there's good reason for it. I'm sure you've heard hundreds of people talk about how good the Apple Silicon in these newer MacBooks have been performing, and it's no different here. While the improvements over the M1 have been modest, I wouldn't expect anyone with an M1 MacBook Air to upgrade strictly for chip improvements. But for those coming from older Intel models, the improvements here are even greater. While the CPU and GPU have had some solid improvements, there are areas like the SSD performance which really are questionable. In fact, compared to the M1, the SSD in the M2 MacBook Air is slower. So if you want your MacBook to have faster performance across the board, then you'll need to upgrade the storage to at least 512 GB. I've uploaded a video in which I ran several tests on this machine, testing everything from the CPU, GPU, RAM, storage, to networking and the HTML browsing speed. So if you want to see that video, then be sure to click the card in the top right corner. But in short, anyone upgrading from a pre-Apple Silicon machine may want to take this MacBook seriously, as it performs better than pretty much every other machine around this price point. If you're the type of person that likes to play the odd game here or there on their MacBook, then you'll be pleased to find that this machine can play several games like Minecraft, League of Legends and even CSGO without an issue. And if you're looking to play a few games from Apple Arcade, then you'll also find no issue. But when it comes to most other games, you really don't want them anywhere near this machine. And if you'd like to see how this MacBook performs when a few games are thrown at it, then click the card in the top right corner to check out that video. The battery life on this MacBook Air has been great, which after my experience with the M1 MacBook Air, I had experienced, and it didn't disappoint. Standby time was long, as I could leave it on standby, and I kid you not, after just about a week I would still come back to just under 20% battery life, and with light streaming, browsing, typing of documents, it could easily last a full 13 hours. And that's still with the machine being left on standby, because hey, I'm not a psycho and I don't use a MacBook for more than 13 hours straight. The standby time on this machine is not something to be overlooked, especially if you're a student or someone traveling around who does not want to be carrying around a charger or a really heavy laptop. macOS has been good across the board. Now, while I've been using it predominantly on my other machines, standout features like universal control work incredibly well. I love being able to use the keyboard and trackpad from one device on another, and improvements made across the board to Spotlight search have been good. So the ability to be able to search one time and have it scan through all of my drives is great, but the addition of being able to view these files from within Spotlight helps tremendously. While we have the clock app in this version of macOS, I rarely ever use it. I mean, there are times where it's nice if I've not got my phone or my watch around, that I can start a timer on my Mac, but I'd mainly use Siri to be able to do something like that. I love being able to group my tabs in Safari and linking them to a focus mode, so when I get to the office using GPS, my focus mode instantly changes and thus my work tabs open up on Safari, and once I leave the office and head back home, vice versa, my personal ones open up and I'm able to pick up browsing where I was the night before. And just like in iOS, having the ability to edit and delete iMessages has been handy in times. Now, a lot of these features are features that I don't normally use every day, but it's good to know that they exist, so when I do need to use them, I certainly can. And well, Stage Manager, it's a little hit and miss for me. I find that on a Mac it's probably not as useful, especially if you're using it in a single display. But if you're using it with a multi-display setup, then yeah, I can see potential use cases there. Although I still find that Stage Manager makes much more sense on the iPad as opposed to macOS. FaceTime handoff is such a simple idea, but it's been executed very well. I love being able to start a call on my iPhone, and when I need to, I can switch across to the MacBook Air, and I only need to do this with maybe 1 or 2 taps, and it picks up the call exactly where I left off, which saves me having to ring the person again and again, which can become quite annoying. I've not ran into many software issues, at least from how I use my Mac, and the main software issue I've probably had is it's a bit more clunky to be able to control lights in the Home app, and I feel like there's a few more steps needed when bringing, the brightness and colors of lights around the home. I feel like there's an additional step or two, and honestly they should use the Force Touch trackpad to be able to alleviate half of that stuff, but I don't know why Apple are not doing it. So it's a Mac, which means a few things, from great build, robust software, to best-in-class performance, battery life, which is the talk of the town, although of course it is locked into Apple's image, so upgradability is basically non-existent, and if you are like most others, then I'm sure you have the odd USB-A device lying around, which still means you'll need adapters. But I'll be honest with you, unless you hate macOS and utterly refuse to give it a go, then you already know to be looking at a Windows laptop, because from a hardware perspective, on almost every level, it's good, great, or potentially best in class, especially for the price. Battery life alone on a portable machine should be one of the top 3 most important things, along with it being thin and light, which this MacBook is. So take away from this what you must, but of course we've got a number of different sales periods coming up, from Black Friday, Cyber Monday, to all of the Christmas sales that will be coming up, and I'm sure you'll be able to find this MacBook Air on sale for a really good price. But as I say, take from it what you must. The speakers are really good, the webcam is also quite good, the microphones are crystal clear, the battery life is second to none, and when I say second to none, it's probably second to other MacBook models. You won't really find any other machine other than a Mac at this current moment in time that will give you this level of performance and battery life in the same device. The screen, when you factor in the price of the device, isn't exactly the worst. It's thin, it's light, it's built well, it's got a great trackpad. Honestly, you won't really find anything better than this for this kind of money, unless you start looking at above £2,000, and at that point you're probably looking at a 14 or even up to a 16-inch MacBook Pro, because the only thing that's better than a MacBook Air is a MacBook Pro. So there you have it, that has been it for today's video. Of course, if you enjoyed the video and learned something new, then be sure to hit the thumbs up button, and if you are new around here, then be sure to subscribe and join us on the journey to 5,000 subscribers. If you've got any questions with anything you've seen in today's video, then be sure to leave them down below in this video's comment section, or alternatively you can hit me up on my social media, links to which can be found down below in the video's description. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care and have a good one.